my son said. "Don't come home for Thanksgiving. My wife doesn't want you." So I dine at a restaurant alone when a stranger asks me to sit with them. 5 years later, they are now my true family. My son learned at my daughter's wedding. You know, sometimes life throws you a curveball so hard, it shatters everything you thought was real. 3 days before Thanksgiving, my own son called me and uttered 7 words that completely erased everything I believed about being a father. "Don't come home. My wife doesn't want you here." Can you even imagine? I ended up eating a lonely Thanksgiving dinner in a restaurant, a plate of food I couldn't taste. But then, an elderly woman, a complete stranger, walked up and asked me to join her family. I had no idea that simple act of kindness was about to split my life wide open, setting in motion a profound journey and a final confrontation with my son that I wouldn't truly understand for 5 long years. My name is Stephen Hayes, and I was 56 that fall. I'm 61 now, telling you this with 5 years of clarity I just didn't have back then. For decades, I'd perfected the art of disappointing people, of seeing their faces close off, of feeling the silence fill with my failures. But that Thanksgiving, sitting alone in an Austin, Texas restaurant, a city I'd moved to for a fresh start just a year earlier, I learned a new skill: how to disappoint myself. The air was thick with the scent of turkey and baked apples, but all I saw were real families. Grandchildren wide-eyed, couples holding hands, a woman's genuine laughter. I was utterly alone. Derek had called 3 days before. My son's voice. It was clipped, formal, uncomfortable, like a stranger's. "Derek. Hi. How are you?" I kept my voice neutral, careful. He cut me off. "Look, I don't have a lot of time. I need something from you. Something important." My stomach dropped. I knew that voice. It was the one he used when he was about to ask for something impossible. "Okay, what do you need?" I asked, bracing myself. "Rebecca and I have been investing in a business opportunity," he rattled off. "A tech startup with serious potential. We need another investment to keep it going. The investors are circling, and if we don't come through, the whole thing collapses." I just listened. "I need $50,000, he said, the words a demand, not a request. "I need it by the end of June. You just sold that house in Connecticut. You have it." No question. He was stating facts, like my money was already his. "Derek," I started, trying to be gentle. But he cut me off again. "If this company goes under, Rebecca and I lose everything. Our savings, our retirement, everything. You have the means to help us." Behind him, I could hear Rebecca's voice, muffled but insistent, coaching him. "I don't think giving you $50,000 is the right thing to do," I said carefully. "I don't know anything about this investment. Have you talked to a financial advisor?" Now his voice had an edge. "This isn't about what sounds risky to you. This is about whether you actually give a damn, or if everything you said about trying to have a relationship is just empty words." I closed my eyes. Standing there in the bookstore, surrounded by books, my son was using guilt like a weapon. "Derek, I care about you, but I don't think giving you $50,000 is the right thing to do. I think you should talk to a professional." "You think you know better than me?" he interrupted, his voice rising. "After you walked out on your own family? After you abandoned Mom and moved across the country?" "I didn't abandon anyone," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I left a marriage that wasn't working. I've stayed in contact with Rachel. I've tried to maintain a relationship with you, even though you've consistently rejected my efforts." "Yeah, because you owe us," Derek shot back. "You owe Mom. You owe me. You don't get to just walk away and start over like nothing happened." I thought about Eleanor and William, the strangers who would become my chosen family. I thought about Rachel, who kept in touch without making me feel like a debt. I thought about Sunday dinners, about people who showed up for each other without keeping score. "Actually," I said quietly, a new clarity dawning on me, "that's exactly not how family works. Family isn't about debt. It's not about owing each other. It's about showing up for each other. And Derek, you're not showing up for me. You're calling to demand money, and when I ask reasonable questions, you're attacking me for things I did years ago. So that's a no." His voice was quiet now, but underneath, something vicious simmered. "That's a no?" he repeated, his words precise, deliberate. "That's a no," I confirmed. A tense pause. I could hear him breathing, hear Rebecca's angry murmur in the background. Then Derek spoke, and his words were devastatingly clear. Then consider yourself dead to me. You're not my father anymore. You don't exist in my life. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't try to contact me again. As far as I'm concerned, you're gone. Now, Derek. I tried, but he'd already hung up. I stood there in the bookstore, phone still in my hand. I didn't feel anger. I felt something quieter. Relief. I didn't know how to be his father in the way he needed, but standing there among the books, I realized I didn't have to be. I had Sunday dinners with Eleanor and William. I had a daughter in Rachel who loved me. I had a life in Austin that was small but real, genuine. Derek could declare me dead, but I'd never felt more alive. That evening, I called Rachel. I told her everything. She listened, always listening, and when I finished, she simply said, "Dad, I'm proud of you. You set a boundary. You protected yourself. That's not selfish. That's healthy." After we hung up, I sat on my apartment couch in the gathering darkness and let myself cry. Not from grief, but from the strange, liberating relief of finally letting go. Months before Thanksgiving, I tried to build a bridge. Not to Derek, exactly, but to the idea of Derek, the son I'd once known before distance and resentment had turned him into a stranger. I'd booked a flight back to Connecticut for early December, convinced that if I just showed up, looked him in the eye, I could fix things. I'd even sold the house in Connecticut, the place where Derek and Rachel grew up, where everything had eventually collapsed. The sale closed in October, leaving me with $273,000. It wasn't wealth, but it was security. It meant I didn't have to stay small anymore. I could take risks. I could try to repair what I thought I'd broken. I'd even bought Derek an expensive watch, something that said, "I've been thinking of you." I was 55 then, 56 by the time everything changed. Then came Thanksgiving and Eleanor Patterson's unexpected kindness. For a moment, I let myself believe maybe there was something here in Austin worth staying for. But Derek was still my son. The trip was still booked. So, after Thanksgiving, I called him. "Hey, I was wondering if we could talk about something," I said. "Sure, Dad. What's up?" "I booked a flight to Connecticut. Early December. I'd really like to see you. I know things have been strained, but oh, Dad." His voice carried that familiar quality, the one that suggested he was about to disappoint me. "Rebecca and I are going to be really busy that weekend. It's the holidays. We have parties, family stuff. It's okay if Rebecca's busy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I came to see you. We could just grab dinner or, I don't think this is a good time," Derek said. The door closing again. "I sold the house," I blurted out, too fast, like I was offering him something. "I closed on it in October. I have the money now to help you if you need it." "It's not a good time," Derek repeated, an edge to his voice. "Why do you keep pushing?" I hung up after that. I couldn't remember what else we'd said. Just the click of the phone and the silence that followed. I kept the flight booked for 3 more days before finally canceling it, taking the $80 cancellation fee like a small punishment I deserved. The watch still sat in its box on my shelf, expensive, useless now. I thought about having money, but no one to spend it on. A son who didn't want to see me, no matter how far I was willing to travel. And I realized something. I was running from Connecticut, but I was also running towards something. I just didn't know what yet. That's when I remembered Eleanor Patterson. Her kind eyes, the way she had simply decided I mattered. The bookstore was quiet the next morning. And for the first time since I'd sold the house, since Derek had rejected me for the 100th time, I thought, maybe I'd been looking in the wrong direction all along. Maybe home wasn't Connecticut. Maybe home wasn't something you built with people who didn't want to build with you. Maybe home was something else entirely. Something you found in the kindness of strangers, something you were offered when you least expected it. Sunday came, my usual day off, and I did something I hadn't done since arriving in Austin. I called Eleanor Patterson. My 55th birthday had been a quiet affair. I'd hoped Derek might visit. "Dad," he'd said over the phone, Rebecca's voice audible in the background. "I'm sorry, but Rebecca's mother is having some health issues, and we promised to help her out that week. It's not a great time for me to travel." "Oh," I'd said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Of course, family first. I understand." But even as I said it, I felt the lie settle in my chest. Derek had never shown up for my birthday. Not once. Always an excuse. Work. Rebecca. Money. Timing. The excuse changed, the result was always the same. I spent my birthdays alone. My 55th was no different. Chinese takeout television. No cake, no celebration. Around 9 p.m. Derek texted, "Happy birthday, Dad. Sorry I can't be there. Rain check." We both knew there'd never be a rain check. But I responded anyway. "No problem. Thanks for the message. Love you." He never replied. That night I sat on my couch and thought about what 55 years had taught me. A son who didn't want me. A daughter I barely knew. A paycheck, but no fulfillment. An apartment echoing with emptiness. I'd spent decades trying too hard, hoping too desperately that this would be the year Derek would care. It was exhausting. Heartbreaking. I didn't know how to stop. 3 months later, on Thanksgiving, Derek called again. This time the excuse was different, but the message was the same. "Dad, Rebecca doesn't think it's a good idea if you come over. She says it would be complicated." And that's when something shifted. Maybe it was that birthday alone. Maybe it was hitting 55 and realizing I was running out of time to be someone other than the man who hoped for scraps of affection from people incapable of giving it. Maybe I just had enough. Whatever it was, I didn't argue. I didn't try to convince him I belong. I just accepted it. "Okay," I said. "I understand." Then I hung up and made a reservation at a restaurant. If my family didn't want me, I decided I would find other people who did. Later, at the Pattersons' table, Eleanor asked about my family. I found myself telling her about Derek, about Rebecca, about that lonely birthday. He called to apologize that day, I told her, a text message at 9 p.m. But it wasn't an apology. It was habit obligation. Eleanor reached across the table and took my hand. "His loss, Stephen," she said simply. "His loss." Sitting there with this woman I'd just met, I realized she was right. Derek had chosen absence. He'd chosen to keep me at arm's length. He'd chosen money and comfort over his father. That was his choice. And at 55 years old, I was finally ready to stop paying the price for it. That's when I made a decision that would change everything. The apartment was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. The plane ticket was worthless. The wrapped gift sat untouched. All I had to do was get on that plane, but I couldn't. Not after what Derek had just said. Not after finally understanding what I'd refused to see for so long. I picked up my phone. Rachel answered on the second ring. Always did. My daughter had a way of making me feel like I mattered. "Dad, your voice sounds I'm fine," I said. But I wasn't. And Rachel already knew. What happened? So I told her. About Derek's call. About the 7 words. About the worthless ticket and the gifts I'd bought with such hope. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, a pause. "Dad," she said carefully, "Derek didn't make that decision." "What do you mean?" "I mean, Rebecca made that decision. Derek's just the messenger. You know how he is. He always does whatever she tells him to do." I thought about all those conversations with Derek, where he'd started sentences with, "Rebecca thinks," or "Rebecca wants." How he'd become less himself and more a proxy for his wife's opinions. "I know," I said quietly. "It's not fair." Rachel continued, her voice rising. "Derek's a grown man. He should be able to make his own decisions about whether he wants his father at his Thanksgiving dinner. But he let her decide for him. He always lets her decide. I can't change that," I said, and I meant it. Nothing I could do to make Derek see what he was doing, to make him stand up to Rebecca, to save him from his own choices. "No," Rachel agreed. "You can't." We sat with that truth for a moment. "So, what are you going to do?" she asked. That was the question, wasn't it? I had options. Self-pity. Anger. Or something different. "I'm not going to let them ruin my day," I said. The words came out before I'd fully thought them through, but as soon as I said them, I knew they were true. "What do you mean?" Rachel asked. "I mean, I'm going to Thanksgiving dinner. Just not with them. Not with family. Just somewhere. Somewhere open. Somewhere that serves a good meal, has other people around. Somewhere that feels like something other than this apartment." I could almost hear Rachel nodding. "That's actually a great idea," she said. "You shouldn't spend Thanksgiving alone just because Derek and Rebecca are being I smiled despite myself. Rachel had never minced words. Exactly. There have to be restaurants open in Austin. She mused. Good ones? You could make a reservation. Make a whole thing of it. Treat yourself. Maybe, I said. Dad. Seriously, you deserve to have a good day. You deserve to celebrate. Don't let them steal that from you. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment. I thought about Derek. Rebecca. The years of small choices that had led to this moment, where my son decided his wife was more important than his father. It hurt. Definitely hurt. But Rachel was right. I didn't have to let that hurt define my day. I stood up, pulled out a nice shirt. Looked in the mirror. When had I gotten so small? When had I started accepting less than I deserved? I grabbed my jacket. The Austin evening was cooling, the sun painting everything orange and gold. People were out, families, friends. I looked at them, living their lives, making their choices, and I made mine. I wasn't going to sit at home and wait for an apology. I wasn't going to let the rejection define how I spent this day. I locked the door and headed out. Somewhere in Austin, there was a restaurant. Somewhere there was a chance for something unexpected. And I was going to find it. After that first Thanksgiving dinner at the Patterson table, I didn't want to leave. This wasn't politeness. This was the desperate clinging of a man who just experienced something he didn't know existed. The warmth, the noise, the genuine affection, not obligation. As dessert was cleared, Eleanor leaned over to me. "Stephen," she said, soft but direct. "Do you have plans for next Sunday?" I almost laughed. Plans? My Sundays were empty. My weeks were empty. My life felt empty. But I just shook my head. "No, ma'am. No plans." "Then come to our house," she said. Not a question. "We have dinner every Sunday. Family tradition. Nothing fancy, just a meal together. William always overestimates how much food to cook, so there's always too much. You should help us eat it." William, listening from across the table, smiled and nodded. "She's right. All the leftovers sit in the fridge getting wasted. You'd actually be doing us a favor." I didn't believe them. People don't invite strangers to their homes out of genuine need. But I didn't argue. The alternative was going back to my apartment, to the silence and empty walls and the weight of my failures. "Okay," I said. "Thank you. I'd like that." 6 o'clock, Eleanor said. "North Austin, near Brushy Creek. I'll write down the address for you." She pulled out a small pen and a receipt from her purse, wrote the address in careful handwriting, and handed it to me. An address I didn't know, in a neighborhood I hadn't explored, in a city I was still learning to navigate. "I don't have your number," Eleanor said. "But you don't need it. Just come. 6 o'clock this Sunday." I nodded, folding the address carefully into my wallet. The drive home that Thanksgiving night was different. Usually, driving alone through Austin felt like drifting through a city that didn't know I existed. But tonight, it felt like moving towards something. I thought about Eleanor's invitation. The way William had nodded, like they'd already decided I was worth inviting. My own daughter Rachel, I'd carefully kept at arm's length to protect her from my neediness. And then this stranger, who'd barely known my name an hour ago, decided I should be part of her Sunday. The bookstore felt different the next morning. My mind was elsewhere. I was counting down the days until Sunday, wondering what to expect. For the first time in months, I was looking forward to something. Saturday morning, I did something I hadn't done since moving to Austin. I went shopping. Not for groceries. I bought a decent bottle of wine from a store where I was starting to recognize the owner. I bought flowers from a grocery stand. They felt too feminine, too much, but I bought them anyway. Then I almost returned them, but kept them. Saturday night, I laid out my clothes for Sunday, like I used to do when Derek was small and we had somewhere important to go. Pressed a shirt. Polished my shoes. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been in years. This mattered. I didn't know why, but it did. Sunday morning came early. I pulled up the address on my phone's GPS, even though I had it written down. North Austin. A drive I'd made vaguely before, but never with purpose. Never with a destination that mattered. I arrived at 5:47 p.m. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, holding the wine and flowers, trying to calm my breathing. This was ridiculous. I was a 56-year-old man about to have dinner with a family I'd met once. It was a kindness, nothing more. I shouldn't expect anything from it. But I did. I expected something. To feel less alone. To find some small corner of belonging, even if temporary. At 5:58, I got out of the car and walked to the front door. Eleanor answered before I could knock, like she'd been expecting me. I would later learn she almost didn't stand up that night, almost didn't extend that invitation. She sat there for a full minute at the Thanksgiving table, hesitating. What if he said no? What if it was awkward? But then William nudged her under the table, caught her eye, and nodded, as if saying, "Go. Trust your instinct." So she did. "Stephen," she said, now smiling. "You came. Come in, come in." I handed her the wine and flowers, suddenly aware of how awkward I looked holding them. "These are beautiful," she said, and she meant it. William appeared from deeper in the house. "Look what Stephen brought! And wine, perfect! We're going to love having you here." He shook my hand, his grip warm, his eyes steady, taking my measure. Then he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture, like he'd reached a positive conclusion. "Come on," he said. "The table's already set. We're just waiting on David and Karen. They're bringing the kids." As I stepped into the Patterson house, I realized something. There had been no exchange of phone numbers, no awkward moment figuring out how to contact them. Eleanor had simply invited me, given me an address, and expected me to show up. No safety net, no easy way to cancel. Just an invitation made in faith that I would come. It was the most trusting thing anyone had done for me in years. I thought I was handling it well at the restaurant. The mask was in place. Smiling when I needed to, nodding at the right moments, playing the part of a man treating himself to a nice Thanksgiving dinner. Nothing sad, nothing broken. But then Eleanor saw the tears. I didn't even realize they were there until I felt the first ones slide down my cheek. I tried to catch it before anyone noticed, lifting my napkin quickly, turning my face toward the window like I was just looking at the city lights. But Eleanor had already seen. Of course she had. Women like Eleanor, the kind who spent a lifetime noticing things about people, don't miss things like that. She said something to William. I caught the tail end. "Just a minute, dear." Then she stood up from her table and walked over to mine with a casual grace that made it seem completely natural, like she wasn't about to walk into a stranger's private grief. "You all right?" she asked gently, pulling out the chair across from me without waiting for permission. I wiped my face quickly, forced a smile. The lie came automatically. "Practiced even." "Allergies," I said. "The restaurant has something in the air, I think." Eleanor smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that believed me. "Hush, Stephen," she said, and I was struck by how easily she used my name, like we'd known each other for years. "Allergies don't usually make people cry on Thanksgiving." No judgment in her voice, just a simple statement of fact. The kind of thing someone says when they've seen enough of the world to know the difference between a sneeze and heartbreak. I looked at her, really looked at her, and something in me just gave way. "My son," I started, and then I couldn't finish. The words got stuck, caught in the tangle of everything I'd been trying not to feel. Eleanor reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Her skin was soft, but her grip was firm. "Real. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to," she said. "But I want you to know that you shouldn't be alone right now." I swallowed hard. I don't really have a choice." "Everyone has a choice," Eleanor said simply. "And I'm choosing to invite you to sit with us. With our family. If you want to." I almost said no. Some part of me, the wounded part, wanted to protect myself. To keep the grief private. Men of a certain age don't cry in public. We don't accept kindness from strangers. We handle our problems alone. But sitting there, looking at this woman who barely knew me but somehow understood everything, I realized that pride was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. "Okay," I said quietly. "Yes. Thank you." Eleanor's smile widened. She stood up, extending her hand to help me. I took it, grateful for the anchor, for the proof that I wasn't floating completely untethered. "Come on," she said. "I want you to meet everyone." The walk across the restaurant felt like it took hours, like I was crossing a threshold into a different version of my life. Families everywhere, caught up in their own conversations. None of them noticed one man following an older woman to a different table. None of them understood that something important was happening. But I did. The Patterson table was in the center of the restaurant, a position of prominence. William looked up as we approached, his face breaking into an immediate smile. Beside him sat a man who had to be David. He had William's eyes, that same quiet strength. David's wife, Karen, was holding a young grandchild, probably not more than 3 years old, who immediately reached toward Eleanor with both arms. "Look who's joining us," Eleanor announced, pulling out a chair that somehow appeared to be waiting for me. "Everyone, this is Stephen Hayes. Stephen, this is my family." William stood and shook my hand again, but this time it felt different, deeper, like he was welcoming me into something. David extended his hand with a warm greeting. Karen smiled, the kind of smile that only comes from genuine kindness. The baby, blonde-haired and gap-toothed, waved at me with a tiny hand, and I found myself waving back. "Stephen, you sit right here," Eleanor said, pointing to the chair she'd pulled out between her and William. "We're just about to cut into the turkey. And I have to tell you, it's one of the best I've had all year." I sat down, and something shifted inside my chest. It wasn't fixed. The pain was still there, still raw and real. But it was different now, less like I was drowning and more like someone had thrown me a rope. The hostess came by quickly with an extra plate, glass, and silverware, like she'd been expecting me all along. Like somehow, this had always been part of the plan. Eleanor began serving me turkey, and Karen leaned over to ask if I preferred my dressing with or without pecans. "With," I said, surprised I remembered. "Good man," David said, and there was something in his tone that made me realize he meant it. This wasn't pity. This was something else. Something genuine. The baby reached over and grabbed my hand, examining my wedding ring with the fierce concentration of someone who found all human artifacts fascinating. "He likes you," Eleanor observed. "Our baby usually takes a while to warm up to people, but something tells me you're different." I looked at this woman, this stranger who had seen me broken in a restaurant, and decided to do something about it. At William, who was loading my plate with second helpings. At David and Karen, who had welcomed me without hesitation. At the baby, still holding my hand. I thought about Derek's voice on the phone, Rebecca's invisible presence, all the ways I'd failed to be the father my son wanted. And then I looked at Eleanor again, and she winked at me. Just a small gesture, a flash of connection, but it was enough to tell me something I'd almost forgotten. Family wasn't just what you were born into. Sometimes it was what you built. Sometimes it was what found you when you were sitting alone in a restaurant on Thanksgiving, broken and bleeding and absolutely convinced that nobody cared. Sometimes family was just people seeing you, and deciding that you mattered. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, late May, 6 months after that first Thanksgiving. I was shelving new arrivals in the philosophy section when my phone buzzed, a number I recognized but hadn't heard from in months. Derek. I almost didn't answer. For a moment, I stood there between Kierkegaard and Sartre, my finger hovering. Around me, the bookstore hummed, soft turning of pages, gentle tap of keyboards. This was my place now. Not just work, but a place where I'd learned to exist without constantly defending my right to be here. I answered. "Dad." His voice carried something I couldn't quite name. Not warmth, not coldness either. Something fragile, desperate. "How are you?" The politeness was strange. We exchanged brief pleasantries. "Austin? Bookstore job?" "Fine." "Good." "Same." I waited for the real reason. Derek didn't call just to ask how I was. He hadn't in years. "I was thinking," he said, "maybe you could visit. Rebecca's mentioned it would be nice if we all got together. The kids have grown so much." I felt something in my chest shift. Not hope, exactly. Caution. The bookstore suddenly felt very far away, even though I was still standing in it, my hand resting on a copy of Being and Nothingness. "That would be nice," I said. A pause. I could hear him breathing, gathering something. Courage, perhaps, or the momentum for what he'd actually called to ask. "About that," he continued, "things have gotten a bit tight financially. Rebecca and I invested in something, a tech venture. We thought it would take off, but—" He trailed off, and I recognized this hesitation. This was the preamble, the setup. "The thing is, we need some capital just to keep it afloat through the summer. If we can get through the next quarter, I really think it's going to work." I said nothing. I was listening, but I was also listening to something else. To the part of me that had spent decades trying to solve Derek's problems, trying to prove my love through money, through availability, through the desperate hope that if I just did enough, sacrificed enough, he would finally see me as worthy. Eleanor had mentioned it during one of our Sunday dinners, the way William handled difficulty. He didn't rush to fix things. He stood still. He let people own their choices. How much? I asked. 50,000. The number hung there. I did the math quickly. The house sale, the retirement account, the modest safety net I'd built in these past 6 months. I had it. That was the terrible, beautiful part. I had it. I can't do that, I said. You don't understand. I do understand, I interrupted, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. I understand that you're scared. I understand that Rebecca is pressuring you, and maybe her father is too. I understand that this feels like an emergency. But Derek, I can't be the solution to this problem. He started to speak again, but I kept going. And I've spent a long time trying to be the kind of father who could fix things with money, who could prove love through availability and sacrifice. And all it did was teach you that I was someone to ask when you needed something, not someone you wanted to know. There was silence on the other end. A real silence, not a pause. That's not fair, he said finally. You left us in Connecticut. I know what I did, I said, and I own that. But I'm not going to keep paying the price for it by becoming the person who rescues you every time you make a choice you can't undo. That's not love, Derek. That's just enabling. It's just me avoiding the harder work of actually being present as your father, not your financial emergency contact. I thought of Eleanor's hesitation before she'd invited me to that first Sunday dinner. The way she'd stood at the threshold between charity and genuine connection. She'd chosen connection. She'd chosen to see me. If you want to talk about what you're going through, I'm here for that, I said. If you want advice about financial counselors or small business loans, I can help you find resources. But I'm not going to give you $50,000 and pretend that's the same as actually showing up for you. So that's it? He asked, his voice sharp with disbelief. You're done with me? The question cut through me, as I suspect he knew it would. But something had changed. Eleanor was part of my life now. William, too. Rachel called me regularly. The bookstore had become a sanctuary. I was learning to live a different story about myself. No, I said quietly. But maybe we need to figure out a different kind of relationship. One where I'm not always trying to apologize for being your father, and you're not always trying to punish me for it. After we hung up, after he said nothing in response, just the soft click of disconnection, I stood in the philosophy section for a long time. A customer asked me where the poetry was, and I directed her automatically, my mind elsewhere. I thought about the kind of man I'd become, about the difference between abandoning someone and setting a boundary, about how love sometimes looks like saying no. That evening, I called Eleanor to ask if I could bring wine to Sunday dinner. The second call came 3 weeks later. A Thursday evening in early June. I was watering the tomato plants Eleanor had helped me plant on the back porch when the phone rang. Derek again. This time, I knew what was coming. We're out of time, he said without preamble. No greeting, no pretense of small talk. The mask had slipped. The investors are pulling out. If we don't have $50,000 by the end of the month, the whole thing collapses. I set down the watering can. I can't help you with that, Derek. You're not listening. I need $50,000. Not advice, not resources. $50,000 transferred to my account by June 30th. The directness was almost a relief. At least now we were standing in the truth. No, I said. You sold the house. I know you have it. You have far more than what I'm asking for. And you're going to let me go under because you want to play therapist and pretend you've suddenly figured out parenting? I felt the words like small stones. They landed, but they didn't break anything. That was the strange new clarity I'd found. Derek's anger couldn't touch the thing I'd built with Eleanor and William, with Rachel, with this new life. No, that's not why I'm saying no, I said quietly. Then why? Why would you have money sitting around while your son, because, I interrupted, giving you $50,000 won't save your marriage. It won't fix the investment. It won't make Rebecca love you more or her father respect you. It will just delay the moment you have to actually deal with what's happening. I don't need your psychology. I need money. I know. But I can't be the solution to that problem anymore. A pause. I could hear Rebecca in the background, asking what I'd said. Derek must have covered the phone. When he came back, his voice was different, sharper, more dangerous. Mom used to say the same thing. He said that I needed to handle my own problems, that she couldn't rescue me. You know what that did? It made me feel like she didn't give a damn. The comparison landed intentionally. He was giving me the chance to feel guilty, to flinch, to reconsider. It was the move that had always worked before. Your mother was a good woman, I said. And she was right. She couldn't save you. And neither can I. But here's what she never got to tell you, that's not the same as not caring. I care about you. I care that you're scared. I care that your marriage is struggling and your business is failing. But I cannot fix these things with money, and pretending I can would be a lie we both keep believing. So, you're choosing Eleanor Patterson over your own son? Is that what you're saying? The accusation hung there. It was designed to hurt, and it did, but not in the way he meant. It hurt because there was a kernel of truth wrapped inside the lie. I was choosing differently. I was prioritizing my own stability. But that wasn't choosing Eleanor over Derek. That was, finally, after 56 years, choosing myself. I'm not choosing Eleanor over you, I said. I'm choosing to stop sacrificing myself to prove something to you that I can never prove. I left you once. I know that. I've carried the guilt of it for decades. But Derek, using that guilt to make me responsible for your adult decisions, that's not family. That's just prolonging the hurt. You want to know what hurts? His voice was sharp, thin as a blade. Knowing my father would rather buy vegetables and read philosophy with some woman he's known for 6 months than help his own son. I thought of the Sunday dinners. Marcus's laugh. Eleanor's steady presence. William's quiet wisdom. Rachel, who stood by me even when Derek was demanding money, who chose to love me the way a daughter actually chooses her father, rather than the way a child demands he fix everything. Then I guess we're at an impasse, I said. Because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm building a life with people who love me as I am, not as a walking checkbook, and I'm not going to apologize for that anymore. Then don't bother, he said, his voice cold. Because you're dead to me. You got that? Dead. You don't exist in my life. He didn't wait for me to respond. The line went silent. I stood on the porch for a long time after that. The tomato plants were still waiting to be watered. The sun was setting, painting the small garden in amber and rose. Everything looked exactly the same as it had before the call. But I felt different. Lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something so long I'd forgotten I had the choice to set it down. I picked up the watering can. The earth was dry. It needed nourishing. Later, when Eleanor and William came over for dinner, I didn't tell them what Derek had said. But as I set the table, as I heard William laugh in the kitchen, as I felt Eleanor's steady hand squeeze my shoulder, I knew I'd already made my choice. I'd made it months ago, at a restaurant in Austin, when a kind woman decided to invite a lonely stranger to her table. Derek would be angry about that for a long time, perhaps forever. But for the first time, I was okay with that. The silence after I hung up was different from before. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't hope. This was finality. I stood in the break room of the bookstore, phone still in my hand, and I understood something with absolute certainty. I would never hear from Derek again. Not a phone call, not an email, not a text message. Derek had made his choice, and I was making mine. I called William immediately. He answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. Stephen, what's wrong? Derek tried to use me for money, I said, my voice hollow. I said no. He got angry. He told me I was dead to him and hung up. A pause on William's end. Then come over now. We need to be together. I drove to the Patterson house as the sun was setting. Eleanor was on the porch waiting. She didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms. He tried to use you, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said into her shoulder. And when I said no, he attacked me. Then he did you a favor, William said, appearing beside us. He showed you exactly who he is. No ambiguity. No more wondering. No more hoping. We went inside. The dinner table was still set. Food was still warm. Eleanor sat me down and put a plate in front of me without asking if I was hungry. David and Karen looked at me with knowing eyes. They'd clearly been told. Marcus was asleep upstairs. Eat, Eleanor said simply. I didn't have the energy to refuse. As I ate, I told them everything. Derek's initial call. His fake apology. Rachel's revelation about his job loss and debt. And this final call, where Derek had screamed at me, called me selfish and cruel. He's right about one thing, I said, setting down my fork. I did leave. I did divorce his mother. I did move away and try to start over. Maybe that makes me a bad father in his eyes. Stephen, Eleanor said gently. But I'm done apologizing for it. I continued, my voice gaining strength. I'm done trying to earn his love. I'm done waiting for him to understand that I'm a human being with needs too. I'm done. I looked around the table at Eleanor, William, David, Karen. I've spent 35 years trying to be the father Derek wanted. I've spent 35 years trying to be good enough, worthy enough, present enough, and he still doesn't love me. He still doesn't want me. So now I'm going to make a different choice. Eleanor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I choose this family, I said. I choose you, all of you. I choose to spend my life with the people who truly choose me. What are you saying? William asked. I'm saying I'm done waiting for Derek. I'm done hoping he'll call. I'm done believing he might change. He's made his choice, and I'm making mine. From this moment forward, I'm fully committed to this family, to you, to this life we're building together. William nodded slowly. That's the strongest thing I've heard you say, Stephen. Since that call, Derek completely disappeared for the next 5 years. Right up until Rachel's wedding. For 5 years he would not call. He would not write. He would not reach out in any way. For 5 years, I would wake up on Sunday mornings with anticipation instead of dread. I would drive to the Patterson house knowing I was wanted. I would sit at their table knowing I belonged there. For 5 years, Derek would choose silence. And in that silence, I would learn to live. The church was filled with light. Rachel stood at the end of the aisle in a dress that made her look like the woman she'd become, strong, sure, beautiful in the way that people are when they've finally arrived where they're supposed to be. I stood in the front row between Eleanor and William, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders like a benediction. Behind us, Marcus, in his best suit, already squirming. Sophia was with Karen, too young to sit through the ceremony without a meltdown. The Patterson family filled 3 pews. My family, the one I'd chosen, and who'd chosen me back. Rachel walked down the aisle, and I watched James's face change when he saw her. That's what real love looks like, I thought. That recognition, that choosing every single day to see the person in front of you. The ceremony passed in a blur of words and promises. I cried, and Eleanor squeezed my hand. William put his arm around my shoulders. When the priest pronounced Rachel and James married, the church erupted, and I found myself cheering louder than anyone else. At the reception, everything was perfect, the way weddings are when the people throwing them have thought of every detail. Flowers, string lights, a band that knew how to play, tables arranged so conversation flowed like wine. Before the reception started in earnest, before the first dance, Rachel pulled me aside into a quiet corner. Her face was flushed, her hair slightly askew. Dad, she said quietly, I need to tell you something. What, sweetheart? I invited Derek. Rachel had kept some contact with him over the years. Texts. Brief updates. He knew pieces of my life, just not the whole truth. The words took a moment to land. Derek? I've been in touch with him for a while, Rachel said, the words coming faster now. Just texts checking in. I know you don't want to talk about him, and I respect that. But he's still my brother, and I didn't know. She paused, gathering courage. I didn't know if he'd actually come, but I needed to invite him. I needed him to see what real family looks like. What you built here. I felt something shift in my chest. Not anger, not even disappointment. Just a kind of complicated love for this daughter who'd had the courage to make her own choice, separate from mine. Does he know? I asked carefully. About Eleanor and William? No, Rachel said firmly. He thinks it's just our family, a regular wedding. He has no idea who's going to be there. I nodded slowly, processing this. Rachel was giving Derek a mirror, letting him see what he'd lost without warning him first. I wasn't sure if that was kind or cruel, but it was Rachel's choice to make. Okay, I said. Thank you for telling me. Rachel hugged me, and I held her a moment longer than usual. The reception proceeded. Dinner toasts, the band playing songs from the 60s and 70s. Marcus danced with Eleanor, his serious face a study in concentration. Sophia tottered across the dance floor, victorious. William and I stood at the edge, watching. Rachel made a brave choice, he said quietly. She did. Are you angry? I considered this. No, I said finally, surprised. A little sad, maybe. But not angry. That's growth, William said. The first dance began. Rachel and James moved together, carefully, as if dancing with someone brand new. The band played. At last, and the whole room seemed to hold its breath. When they finished, the DJ invited family to join. Eleanor pulled me to my feet before I could protest, and we moved on to the dance floor. William followed. David and Karen joined in. Marcus tried to cut in on Eleanor and me, and we let him, the three of us stumbling together in a laughter-filled tangle of limbs. That's when I saw him. Derek. Standing at the edge of the reception pavilion, still wearing his outdoor shoes. His suit rumpled from travel. His face had aged in the 5 years since I'd seen him. Lines around his eyes, a hardness to his mouth that suggested life had not been gentle. But what struck me most was the look on his face when he saw Eleanor, William, and me standing there together. Recognition. Not of familiarity, but of loss. He was watching his father, his biological father, standing between two people who held him like he belonged there. And he understood in that instant that he'd given this away. That he'd chosen anger and rejection over this. Eleanor's hand found mine. William's arm came around my shoulders. Derek's eyes moved from William to Eleanor to me, and I saw the moment when he realized that they weren't just random family friends. They were my family. The family he'd refused to be part of. He turned and walked away before anyone else noticed him. The dance continued around us. The music played. Rachel and James moved through the crowd, greeting guests. Marcus came back and demanded ice cream. Sophia fell asleep in Karen's arms. And I stood there, between Eleanor and William, watching my life unfold exactly as it was supposed to. Later, when Rachel and James were preparing to leave for their honeymoon, Rachel hugged me tight. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For being the person who shows me what real love looks like. For choosing us. For never giving up on me, even when things were hard. That's what family does," I said. "And I know," Rachel said. "I learned it from you." I didn't realize Derek had re-entered the pavilion until after the family dance ended. He was standing near the bar, nursing a drink, watching us. For a moment, we just looked at each other across the crowded reception. 5 years. 60 months. Suddenly, there he was, older, harder, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, shoes scuffed from travel. But what struck me most was the look on his face when he saw Eleanor, William, and me standing together. Recognition. Not of familiarity, but of loss. He was watching his father standing between two people who held him like he belonged there. And he understood in that instant that he'd given this away. I walked toward him. "Derek. Stephen." He used my name like it tasted bitter. "Or should I call you Dad? I hear that's what the kids call you now. How much do you know?" "Enough," Derek said, gesturing toward Eleanor and William with his drink. "Rachel told me some things when I texted her. Asked me to come today. Didn't tell me the whole truth, though. Didn't mention that you'd already replaced us. That you'd already found a new family. That's not what this is," I said. "No?" Derek's voice had an edge. "Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you got everything you wanted. A family that actually wants you. Parents who actually care. A daughter who treats you like you walk on water. Everything we couldn't give you." "Derek," Eleanor said softly, having walked up behind me with William. "We never wanted to replace anyone. Stephen came into our lives and we chose to love him. That choice didn't diminish anything. It added something." "That's a nice story," Derek said bitterly. "But that's not how family works. Family is exclusive. You don't get to have both." "Actually," I said, "you do have to choose." And I did. 5 years ago, after our last conversation, I chose this family because they chose me. Because they saw me. Because they didn't make loving them conditional on me being someone I'm not. Derek's jaw clenched. "You chose them over your own son?" "No," I said firmly. "I chose peace over pain. I chose people who would meet me halfway over people who required me to grovel and apologize for existing. I chose to stop waiting for you to decide I was worth loving. You abandoned me, Derek said. And for the first time, I heard something other than anger in his voice. I heard grief. A young man who'd made terrible choices and was now facing the consequences. I set a boundary, I said. After you asked me for money you had no intention of repaying. After you called me with lies instead of truth. After you told me I was dead to you. I stepped back, and I let my daughter maintain her relationship with you because that was her choice to make. But me, I'm done, Derek. I'm done trying to be enough for you. I'm done measuring my worth by your approval. Eleanor squeezed my hand. You've been gone for 5 years, I continued. Not dead. Just absent. And I built a life in that absence. A real life. A family that shows up, that chooses me every single day, the way I choose them. Derek looked at the three of us standing together. He looked at Rachel across the room, dancing with her new husband. He looked at Marcus and Sophia, part of a family ecosystem that had no room for his bitterness. I should have treated you better, he said finally. And the words sounded like they cost him something. When you needed me. Yes, I said. You should have. I can't fix that now. No, I agreed. You can't. But you can make different choices going forward. You can decide to be better, to mean what you say, to choose honesty instead of manipulation. That's all any of us can do. Derek stood there for a long moment, holding his drink, looking at the man he rejected and the family I'd built without him. I noticed security nearby, alert, but not intervening. They didn't move, just stood there, present, observing, waiting for my signal. I don't know how to do that, Derek said quietly. Then maybe start by going home, I said. Start by figuring out what you actually want, who you actually are when you're not measuring yourself against me or trying to use me. Derek set down his drink and turned toward the exit. At the door he paused, looked back once, and then he was gone. Eleanor pulled me into an embrace. You did good, she said into my shoulder. I'm okay, I said, and I realized I meant it. Truly meant it. Derek's pain. Derek's loss. Derek's consequences. None of it was mine to carry anymore. I'd already spent 30 years trying to carry it. I'd already spent 5 years learning to set it down. This was just confirmation. This was just Derek finally seeing what I'd already understood. I was done. Rachel found me afterward. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I should have told you more about inviting him. It's okay, I said. You did what you needed to do. You gave him a chance to see. What he does with that is up to him. Are you upset with me? No, I said. I'm proud of you. You loved him in the way you could, and you also stood with me. That's integrity. Rachel hugged me, and I held her, thinking about how far we'd all come. From that Thanksgiving when her father sat alone in a restaurant to this moment, where she stood beside me as I finally, truly let go. The night continued. The band played. People danced. And I danced with Eleanor, and I danced with William, and I danced with my daughter, secure in the knowledge that I'd finally come home. 3 weeks after Rachel's wedding, I sat at the Patterson dining room table on a Sunday evening. The sun was setting outside, casting everything in gold. Eleanor had made lasagna. William had opened wine. Marcus, now 7 and missing his 2 front teeth, was telling a story about school that had everyone laughing. This was life now. These Sunday dinners. These people who'd chosen me the way I'd chosen them. After dessert, Eleanor asked me to say something. It had become a tradition, a small reflection. I'd never been good at these moments, but I tried. For 35 years. I began, my voice still. I thought family was something that came to me, something I was bound to by blood or circumstance. I spent 35 years trying to be the kind of father my son would be proud of. 30 years proving myself, believing that if I just worked hard enough, loved wholeheartedly enough, everything would be all right. But that never happened. Eleanor reached across the table and took my hand. I spent those 30 years looking for belonging in the wrong place. I continued. Looking for it in someone who couldn't see me. Looking for it in obligation instead of choice. And then one Thanksgiving, I sat alone in a restaurant, and a woman stood up and asked if I wanted to join her table. One moment. One yes. And everything changed. Rachel leaned forward slightly. I could see her eyes were wet. 5 years ago, Derek called me, I said. He didn't call to check on me. He called to demand money, $50,000. When I said no, he told me I was dead to him. He meant it. For 5 years I didn't hear from him. Not a call, not a text. Nothing. I paused, looking at each of their faces. Eleanor. William. Marcus, with his gap-toothed smile. Rachel. David. Karen. But here's what I learned in those 5 years. Family isn't about biology. It's not about obligation. It's not about proving yourself over and over again, hoping someone will finally see your worth. Family is about being chosen. Every single day you're chosen and you choose back. William squeezed Eleanor's hand. Derek had to learn that the hard way. Or maybe he's still learning it. I don't know. I hope someday he understands that I didn't replace him. I just stopped waiting for him to decide I was worth keeping. I stopped believing that love was something I had to earn. And I found people who loved me without conditions, without keeping score, without needing me to be anything other than honest. I looked at Eleanor and William. You took me in when I was a stranger. You invited me to your table when I was sitting alone. You gave me a place at your Sunday dinners. And over these 5 years, you made me part of your family. Not as an obligation, not as charity, but as a choice. You chose me. And that choice changed everything. Marcus grinned, showing off his missing teeth. Okay, Grandpa, you're getting sappy, he said. But he was smiling. I laughed. That word still caught me sometimes. Grandpa. I hadn't expected to earn it. I hadn't expected to earn any of this. After dinner, Eleanor and I stood on the back porch. The Texas night was warm, cicadas singing. Eleanor put her arm through mine, the way she'd started doing about 3 years ago, like it was the most natural thing in the world. You did good today, she said quietly. Saying all that. I meant it, I said. Every word. I know you did. That's why it mattered. We stood in silence for a moment, and I thought about the man I'd been 5 years ago, alone in an Austin apartment, eating Thanksgiving dinner by myself, believing that family was something that had rejected me, and I was too old to find a new one. I'd been wrong about so many things. Thank you, I said. For everything. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Eleanor squeezed my arm. We didn't see you, Stephen. We recognized you. There's a difference. We recognized someone who deserved to be seen, and we chose to do it. Later that night, as I lay in bed, listening to Austin's distant traffic, the occasional siren, the hum of the city going on, I thought about Derek. I wondered if he was okay. I wondered if he'd found his way. But I also knew that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd spent 30 years carrying that weight. I was done. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. In a few days it would be Sunday again. We'd gather around that table. Eleanor would make something delicious. William would pour wine. Marcus would complain about homework, and show me a loose tooth. Rachel would be there with James. And I would belong. Not because I'd proven myself, not because I'd finally been good enough, but because I'd learned that family isn't something you're born into or something you earn. Family is something you choose. And when you're brave enough to say yes to someone's invitation, when you're willing to sit at a table you weren't born to, when you open yourself to people who open themselves to you, that's when you find it. That's when you come home. I've told you my story, a man who spent decades searching for love in all the wrong places, especially from a son who, at that time, wasn't capable of giving it. I allowed myself to become a machine designed solely to feed rejection. If you're like me, if you're searching for acceptance from people who will never give it, stop now. Don't waste precious years waiting for a miracle from someone who doesn't want to change. Here's the lesson I learned, and it's simple. Family is not blood. Family is choice. God doesn't send love through DNA alone. He sends it through people. People who see you suffering and decide to do something about it. God sends love through deliberate, daily, unconditional actions. And when you find it, hold tight, because that's grace. What about you? Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Or walked away from a toxic relationship to find peace? I really want to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let me know.